On Wednesday, October 15, 2025, something happened at the Pentagon that was unprecedented in its history. CBS News packed up their desk and walked away. CNN cleared out their workspace. Fox News left too. Virtually every major news outlet that covers your military abandoned their Pentagon offices on the same day. In October 2025, the Pentagon proposed new limits on congressional access to military information, covering briefings, documents, and facility visits. Bipartisan lawmakers cited constitutional concerns. The proposal was withdrawn within days. 1 month later, similar information restrictions appeared in journalist credentialing requirements, but the new press restrictions remain. Welcome to Mimi Leaks. Recently, I read 2 memos outlining new rules and limiting press access, one in the White House and the other related to the Pentagon. Today, we'll trace how we got here, from decades of Pentagon press operations to the December changes that emptied the press room. We'll examine who's filling those empty seats now, why this matters for government oversight, and discuss reactions inside the press, including the lawsuit filed just this past week, challenging these restrictions. Please like the video and subscribe for more. The issue centers on one requirement that changes how journalism works inside the Pentagon, a clause about unauthorized disclosure of information that goes beyond classified material reporters already couldn't publish and includes everyday information about equipment delays, budget reports, staffing numbers, and healthcare wait times. When journalists refused to sign this agreement, they had to leave their workspaces. The Pentagon press room, full since the 1940s, now sits largely empty. The Pentagon opened in the 1940s, and not long after, reporters got permanent workspace inside the building. They're not visitors, but residents with desks, phones, and direct access to military leadership. This arrangement survived the Korean War, where reporters filed stories about troop movements and strategy debates. It continued through Vietnam, where critical coverage led to policy changes. The press maintained its presence during the Cold War's nuclear tensions, Desert Storm's precision warfare, September 11th's aftermath, and 2 decades in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2008, the Bush administration issued a memorandum establishing Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI, in order to standardize information handling, marking, and safeguarding. Then, in 2010, the Obama administration established CUI as an open, uniform program across agencies in order to streamline information and information sharing. Many cautiously accepted this version because it defined clear boundaries and seemed to fix the overreach problem earlier versions contained. Between 2017 and 2019, the Pentagon's relationship with the press shifted noticeably. The building went 300 days without holding an on-camera press briefing, breaking decades of regular communication. Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, requests for basic documents faced unprecedented delays. Media organizations ended up filing 386 federal lawsuits for information during this period, which exceeded the total from the previous 16 years combined. Reporters describe a systematic resistance to basic transparency. This tension would simmer for years, and then came 2025. May 2025 brought the first formal moves. Officials removed dedicated Pentagon office space outlets that had covered the building for decades, including multiple Pulitzer Prize winners with combined readerships in the tens of millions. These spots went instead to newer outlets with smaller audiences, several founded within the last decade, in what they call a rotation program. The message was clear: access could be redistributed at will. Then on May 23, 2025, a memo appeared titled Updated Physical Control Measures for Press and Media Access Within the Pentagon. Framed as a security measure versus a redefinition of press rights, its language talked about enhancing security and establishing proper procedures without providing specifics. The memo mentioned reviewing credentialing processes and updated access protocols, but stayed vague about implementation. Press organizations requested meetings to discuss the changes. They wanted clarity on how physical control measures would affect their daily work. The Pentagon promised further guidance was coming, as the May memo suggested, but didn't reveal the full scope of what was planned. On September 18th, journalists reviewed a new Pentagon reservation in brief memo to sign. Buried in administrative language, they found something they were not expecting. They must pledge not to seek or obtain unauthorized material, even if it was unclassified. The agreement specifically mentioned classified, controlled unclassified, or other information that is not authorized for public release. This went beyond any previous restrictions. The document expanded the Pentagon's power to revoke or deny credentials detailed in Appendix A. It required journalists to obtain additional press identifier badges outlined in Appendix B. For the first time, the Pentagon explicitly tied press access to content restrictions. Remember that CUI category from 2010 that protected privacy? This agreement expanded it far beyond its original purpose. Budget overruns, equipment failures, and troop morale surveys all could now be deemed unauthorized. Major outlets refused to sign. On October 6th, the Pentagon replaced its September credentialing memo with another version. September had required journalists to essentially get pre-publication review when reporting on DoD or Department of Defense matters. October removed that requirement, but it kept the core restriction. Journalists still couldn't seek or report on unauthorized information. The memo explicitly stated press access was a privilege, not a right, and specified that solicitation of leaks could justify credential revocation. The change was meaningless. Without pre-publication review, how would journalists know what was unauthorized? They removed the safety check, sure, but kept the minefield. Even after the October 6 revision, major outlets stood firm. CBS, CNN, NBC, ABC, Fox News, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Reuters, Bloomberg, Associated Press, NPR, Politico, and more all refused to sign. The competitors spoke mostly with one voice. So on October 15th, at the 4 p.m. deadline set by DoD, journalists packed up decades of accumulated resources, removed personal items from desks their predecessors occupied since the 1940s, and walked out. Before we get to the current press pool, let's talk about another important factor: Americans' trust in the press, as it's largely eroded over the years. The General Social Survey is a well-known and respected survey due to the reliability in what they're measuring and its validity in what it measures. Americans' confidence in the press it receives. By 2024, 54% of Americans say they have hardly any confidence in the press, a sentiment that I can relate to be quite honest. Gallup's 2023 survey found only 28% trust the media to fully report the news and do so fairly, the lowest level ever recorded. I get it. The press, as an institution, it could use an overhaul, and on its face, a functional press rotation inside the Pentagon Press Corps sounds reasonable. It could bring in fresh perspectives, more diversity, maybe even more accountability. But is that what actually happened? As a spoiler, no, but let's discuss. Sean Parnell, who presumably drafted and indeed did sign off on the May, September, and October changes, stated there are 60 members, but Pentagon refuses to release the complete roster. Of its current press pool, those who stayed include Turkish state media, freelancers, and outlets like Frank Speech, owned by MyPillow's Mike Lindell. Other press outfits include Turning Point USA, Gateway Pundit, and Post Millennial. Tim Pool has access as a freelancer, and then Benny Johnson reports through TPUSA. Taylor Hansen writes for Gateway Pundit. Dave Rubin has been featured in post-millennial articles. What's interesting is that just a year ago, the same commentators were allegedly duped into spreading Russian propaganda to their viewers, and at least one received $100,000 per episode. And then there were other bonuses too for some of the other commentators. The foreign connections, however, they don't stop there. In April 2025, Tim Pool and Dave Rubin attended a confidential meeting with Netanyahu, convened specifically to influence, quote, growing anti-Israel sentiment with right-wing podcast circles. For more on how foreign actors compensated commentators for spreading propaganda and how it got funneled to them, check out my Tenet Media series where I read the indictment. Listen, transparency matters. That a full roster of the press isn't available at all times is concerning, and it prevents public oversight of who's shaping national security narratives. Journalists who aren't actually journalists are now navigating complex military issues without the context to ask informed questions. And the security rationale doesn't match Parnell's solution. Turkish state media having access while U.S. outlets don't is strange. 2/3 of commentators duped into spreading Russian propaganda to millions just a year ago, having access to the Pentagon and its pressers, seems like a large oversight without any other context. Let me show you exactly what these rules prevent in practical terms. In 2007, the Washington Post reporters exposed horrific conditions at Walter Reed, wounded soldiers living with mold and cockroaches. The Army Secretary resigned, the commander was fired, and Congress launched reforms. In 2005, reporters revealed Marines received defective body armor. Nearly 10,000 vests were recalled. Pentagon reporters documented F-35s delivered late 91% of the time, while costs ballooned past $2 trillion. These stories were published because journalists could investigate within its already established guidelines without pre-authorization. Before this agreement, when a reporter heard concerns about faulty body armor, she could investigate. She'd find a soldier willing to discuss the issue, verify the claims through multiple sources, check procurement documents, and publish the story. The public would learn about the problem, Congress would demand answers, and troops would get proper protection. This is how oversight has worked for decades. Under the new rules, that same reporter seeking the same unclassified information violates her credentialing agreement. It doesn't matter that it's not classified. It doesn't matter that troop safety is at stake. Based on the wording, the act of seeking this information without prior authorization is itself the violation. She loses Pentagon access and the story dies. There's no list of what information is authorized versus unauthorized. A reporter could call to verify the Pentagon's published cafeteria hours and potentially violate the agreement if those hours haven't specifically been authorized for public release. The Pentagon maintains this as standard practice, and they compare it to any military installation. At Nellis Air Force Base, media applications focus on physical access, where journalists can go, who escorts them. Fort Bragg's media office actively facilitates interviews between reporters and soldiers. They focus on managing visits versus content. Comparing the Pentagon to other bases ignores crucial differences. Other bases don't house the entire military leadership making decisions that affect global security. Other bases don't manage contracts worth hundreds of billions annually. Other bases don't set policies that determine how America projects power worldwide. The Pentagon is the nerve center of the world's most powerful military, and transparency there serves a unique public interest. Let's look at what those in the institution of the press itself have remarked. Press associations warned the consequences of them would stifle a free press. Journalism watchdog groups found no evidence that existing procedures had failed. A solution looking for a problem, so to speak, organizations called the changes a gross violation of press freedom, unprecedented, and warned oversight would wane. Just a few days ago, on December 4th, the New York Times filed a federal lawsuit against the Pentagon, challenging these restrictions on First Amendment grounds. The lawsuit claims the new policy is exactly the type of speech and press restrictive scheme that the Supreme Court recognizes as unconstitutional. This marks the first major legal pushback from legacy media, with the Times arguing the rules prevent journalists' ability to ask questions and gather information beyond official pronouncements. When access narrows and definitions shift, accountability becomes harder to trace. The Pentagon says this protects security, but when billion-dollar programs fail without scrutiny, when equipment malfunctions go unreported, when decisions affecting military readiness happen in darkness, we must ask, whose security does silence serve? Democracy needs witnesses, especially in the places where power concentrates and budgets soar and decisions echo across the world. Those witnesses just walked out of the Pentagon. The question now is who's watching and what happens in the silence they leave behind. Thanks for watching and supporting this channel. If you would like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button. And please like and remember that sharing is caring. Until next time, stay safe.